I watched Sitting Bull last night. The History Channel made it, but I saw it on Netflix. It is good in that it does not do more than it should or attempt to. General Crook is missing entirely, which is weird. Crazy Horse and Red Cloud are featured, and the whole saga is satisfactorily distilled to the story of a deep and hermetic culture, nomadic and hunter-gatherer, relying massively on the great buffalo herds for, as they say, almost everything, and with a belief system to fit. I've been fascinated by many cultures, not mine, for lots of reasons, including feeling I don't fit in mine, or it doesn't speak to me very much. And I have spent the last few years studying this phenomenon, not the other cultures, but the phenomenon. To be clear, I did not transmute. I found my own green trees, fields. I found my babbling brook, tribally. That worked. To sum up the Lakota premise simplistically, one of the contributors says early on that this belief system was basically that everything, all life and inanimate stone, was animated with spirit. It reminded me of a passage in a book called The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, or in Archetypes and Natural History of the Self. Forgive me, they're both worth their weight in gold if you are at all like me, where the author describes what an ancient Athenian saw and felt on a morning walk. That civilization, the Native American, fascinate me because they seem to have entirely different responses to existence than we or you do. I have done a lot of knocking of our culture. I'll continue. The place we have come to. I understand it now, but I judge that its greatest flaw is that it doesn't make for great human beings. That is not our habit, and evidence of this depravity is everywhere. It starts in school, of course, where the view that we are born sinners and likely evil-leaning if we are not made to obey exerts its great clamping effect. And I do not mean we miss Alexander or Caesar or Jesus or, God forbid, Napoleon, but that we sell ourselves short for the conveniences of power. I'm not an individualist. They bore me. Greatness floats, though unseen, among us all. I have a feeling the Lakota didn't think much about ordinary folk. As I encounter these cultures, just stand and behold, I see more and feel more. So when I learn about their marriages or their democracies, decision-makings, and wars, I do not imagine Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump or really any contemporary consciousness I have encountered. In the Sitting Bull story, we have something we white people can grasp. It is made that way. A leader of his people, chosen as a boy because of talents and acts as a leader. He might have been singled out and watched, a promising student. That may be how the culture works, this scrutiny. It would be interesting to know, for instance, if there was envy of this child. I use the term loosely since we have a way of leading that I suspect he didn't follow. He was a great warrior, easily said, but they hint at the almost Homeric take on violence. In essence, we have moved away from as a civilization, fighting as we do. I didn't imagine a jefe sitting on a horseback on a hill above a battlefield directing charges. Other people will have a much better idea how he might have fought, but I think he was in the fray, which makes all the difference. His cause against the various encroachments of Europe was to maintain his way of life, and like all ways of life, it is a tangled web of compulsions and imperatives mixed with the basics of getting food and shelter. Tribalism, to use the broad term, contains so many universals we in the West have willfully departed from. To use a tiny example, much of our political philosophy centers on who is good and who is not, who is lazy and who is industrious, who gets up in the morning and goes to work, who goes to school, who feeds those who cannot feed themselves, who is kept alive and who is taken off life support. The whole oeuvre of the tribe is collective. Everyone is found to be useful and to be meaningful. People brought up so believe it forever. If they are pushed into the outside world, they think the rest of us are the same tribe, the way a wolf might have suckled Mowgli or Romulus, or a hungry mouth to feed. And of course, these societies create those creation myths that we don't. We see ourselves and are seen by many of the rest as having won, prevailed. Our way of life is the most successful, and it is according to our values. Whether or not it allows us to fulfill ourselves on any level at all, it is culture mostly of obedience. The story, as History Channel tells it, is very sexy, very noble, savage, good. At the time, and long since, this man and his tribe would have been depicted as just savage. But what struck me as he moved closer and closer to the bizarre ending was how we, as members of the big universalist monotheisms, the hegemon, the dominant cultures, might have a hankering, a wistful, whimsical missing of this tiny Lakota band straggling into Canada, following the buffalo the barbarous Tecumseh Sherman had suggested the white man wipe out to starve the plains tribes and force them onto the reservations. Charming, typically European behavior. This act is so typically and distinctively European, I gag at it. This man finds no magic in the stones and the trees and the animals who are his brothers and sisters. He is the arid Christian whose religion has done the work the genocidal cultures need, the debasing and dehumanizing, making devoid of spirit all that is not him. And he commits genocide on the buffalo. And no one says, hang on a minute, pity for the buffalo is not an European agenda. On the European agenda, we have the great mechanized slaughterhouses and factory farms. We ran into these people 500 years ago, and quite quickly they fascinated the Enlightenment, who condescendingly painted the noble savage picture, but never ran naked through any forest. Voltaire would have caught a chill, n'est-ce pas? So they remain all we are not. And some of us, like me, would have wondered what it would be like to, be a brave, etc. Kevin Costner. Most of us did not, but something, I think, psychological happened in the psyche that gives us the word, some ancient deep longing, almost a fetish, to be the brave tribal member with an individual god pantheon, one or many misunderstood and therefore persecuted by the barbarian majority monsters. This longing would be individual, alone, and the feeler would feel lonely and crave to belong to a tribe so distinct and superior that, of course, the rest do not understand. This is what the European does with the Sitting Bull story and writes it into its Bibles. I think this deep desire comes out of deprivation, like many desires do. This hankering to belong might not be so strong when one actually does belong. We of the universalist hue think we repudiate tribalism with one God above all, for all, and those who believe differently are wrong, ignorant, or evil. But it seems that universalists miss their tribes, so their tribalism is hid, necessary as air and water to the member. It is a conundrum. The tribe makes us feel part of something, we think, but as we are born into it, we would not feel a part of it. We are allowed to feel rather than are taught. The children's original sense that the world is full of magic is allowed and ritualized. It is hard to imagine how different this take is from ours today. There were shamans, specialists, but everyone was shamanic, it seems. Crazy Horse, the great fighter, was thought to be holy. I imagine today rather like George Jackson or Achilles. It is the lie upon which Western civilization lolls, and the present shows us how much the Western citizen longs to be free to hate all their pent-up hate, wounded by all the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and wokeness, taking down their awful weak sense of self. This is the buried and ignored Zionist in Westerners. It is genuinely a great strength of the Jewish people who identify with its cause that it is the essence of tribalism. Christianity forbid itself. A Christian forte, forbidding stuff. Why they hated the Jews so enthusiastically in the 500 years of their supremacy, and now that the shit's hit the fan, they adopt its nihilism for themselves, revealing themselves to themselves at last. The trick of Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Red Cloud, Pontiac, it seems, is that their tribalism, its naturalness, its congruity with nature and the spirit of all things made it what monotheism fails entirely to do. Based on law and stricture, the human dies prematurely and kills without remorse before it does. The Bushmen of the Kalahari speak of two kinds of hunger. The little hunger is the hunger for food, the need for something in your belly, a fire in your body that must be fed to stay alive. But then there's the great hunger, the hunger for meaning, the hunger that lives deeper than the stomach, in the chest, in the bones, in the silence behind your eyes. It is the ache to belong, to matter, to know why you are here. Lawrence van der Post, the man pictured here, spent years among the Bushmen, listening, learning, trying to understand what we've forgotten in the modern world. He said the most dangerous thing in life isn't sadness, it's emptiness, the slow, bitter erosion that comes from living without meaning. We chase money, status, comfort. We chase happiness like it's the point. But happiness is fleeting. Meaning is enduring. Because once you're doing something that matters, really matters to your soul, it doesn't matter whether you feel good all the time. You feel right. You feel connected. You feel like you belong to something bigger than you. And in that belonging, even the hardships become sacred. This photo isn't just a meeting between two men, it's a quiet moment between two ways of being. One remembers that we are not just bodies to be fed, but spirits to be fulfilled. And maybe that's the real hunger we've been trying to feed all along.